All right, we have some breaking news now involving the White House. Let's get straight to our justice correspondent over there in Washington, Evan Perez. We've also got Gloria Borger up on this as well. What's going on with Jared Kushner?
Well, Brooke, at this hour, we're finding out that the White House has now restored Jared Kushner's security clearance. If you remember, it was suspended back in February when the White House was doing an overhaul of security clearances after the Rob Porter scandal. He was still employed at the White House despite the allegations of spousal abuse. And so the security clearances of Jared Kushner and other top officials, several top officials who had been pending, was suspended at the time. We're told that the word now from the White House is that it is now officially restored. This is something that people close to Jared Kushner say was done through the normal process. There was no pressure put on the FBI that did the review for the security clearances. No pressure was put on it from the president or anybody else. Obviously, we know that there's been months of a cloud over Jared Kushner about the security clearance. In this first submission, if you recall, back in 2017, there was a number of dozens of foreign contacts that were left off the application. Those omissions were later corrected in later submissions. But now officially, Jared Kushner can say that he has a full permanent security clearance cleared by the FBI at this point.
All right, so security clearance restored. And Gloria, I wanted you to jump in on the other piece of the news that you all are breaking about how he met with Team Mueller another time.
Right. He did in April, we know, meet with the special counsel team for a 7-hour interview. And our source familiar is telling us that he was not asked about his business dealings, but rather other issues that we would have expected him to be asked about. Now, you'll recall that in November, we broke the news that Jared had been interviewed by the special counsel for about 90 minutes to 2 hours, but it was largely limited to questions about General Flynn. This time, clearly, the interview was more substantive and involved, Jared Kushner himself. What we don't know is whether that interview is related to the fact that Jared Kushner has now gotten his security clearance. But it would seem to me, and Evan knows more about this, that if the special counsel had an awful lot of lingering questions, that the security clearance would not have been approved.
Brooke, let me just add real quick. We know that among the things that he was asked about was obviously his role in the campaign, his role in the transition. Obviously, he met with Ambassador Kislyak of Russia. That was one thing that obviously has been hanging over this, and that is something that we know Special Counsel Robert Mueller has been investigating. We also know, at least according to a person we talked to, that post-inauguration, one of the things that the special counsel did cover was the issue of the firing of James Comey, the former FBI director. You remember that people close to Jared Kushner have been saying that he played no role whatsoever in the president's decision to fire Jared Kushner, to fire James Comey. That is obviously something, though, we know that he was in New Jersey at the President's Golf Club when that decision was made, and so this was something that was brought up in this interview with Robert Mueller's team.
Okay. Right, because people who are not close to Jared Kushner made the point to us as we were reporting the story of the firing of Comey that he drove the decision as opposed to being just a bystander in the decision and approving of it after the president made the decision to do it. So clearly that's an important topic of conversation, because when you think about the question of obstruction and the president of the United States, firing of James Comey looms very large in that.
Do you think, turning to you, Jeff Toobin, on the fact that Kushner did talk again to the Mueller team for, I think Gloria said 7 hours, not related to business dealings, but a lot of other, territory covered. Do you think, for A, what do you make of that? And B, do you think those other issues that they discuss would be things that perhaps Trump doesn't want to talk about with Mueller?
Well, it's hard to know. It's certainly good news for the president and certainly for Jared Kushner that his security clearance has been restored.
Sure.
That was an embarrassment to both of them, given how close he is to the president. And the fact that he did give another voluntary interview to Mueller's office is, I suppose, good news because it shows that he was cooperating with the investigation. But what he said and what he was questioned about, it's really it's very, very hard to know. Obviously, there is this of obstruction of justice. Was there any, did the president improperly fire Robert Mueller, interfere with, fire James Comey? That legal question and that factual question is something that the Mueller is obviously investigating. The other issue is what were the contacts between Russia and the Trump campaign during the campaign. That's another subject he would certainly be asked about. What he said, how much Mueller knows, that of course, I don't know.